Some warnings are meant to protect you. Others are meant to protect something else. When police entered the abandoned farmhouse on the outskirts of Black Ridge County, they expected to find a burglary, maybe a suicide, or perhaps another missing person case that had finally reached its conclusion. Instead, they found a dead man lying at the bottom of a basement staircase. There were no signs of forced entry, no evidence of a struggle, no fingerprints besides his own and his wife's. Yet the look frozen on his face would haunt every investigator who saw it. It wasn't fear, it was realization, as though in the final seconds of his life, he had finally understood something he never should have discovered, something hidden beneath his own home. Something his wife had warned him about from the very beginning: never open the basement door. 6 months earlier, Daniel Mercer believed he had finally outrun loneliness at 39. He lived a life most people would envy: a successful architect, financially secure, and people respected his projects that covered half the state. People trusted him to design homes where families would spend generations. Ironically, he had never managed to build one for himself. Relationships came and went, and some ended peacefully. Others simply faded, but each one left him a little less convinced that love was something people actually found, or maybe it was something people settled for. Then one day he met Evelyn. They first crossed paths at a historic preservation fundraiser held inside an old courthouse. Daniel had attended only because one of his clients insisted. He spent most of the evening pretending to study architectural sketches displayed along the walls. He wasn't looking for conversation. Then someone quietly said, "You keep staring at the foundation." Daniel turned. A woman stood beside him. Dark hair, gray coat, calm eyes. She wasn't smiling. "You noticed?" "I noticed where buildings hide their weight." Daniel laughed. "Most people admire the windows. Windows tell people what they want to see." She looked toward the floor. "Foundations tell the truth." The sentence lingered longer than it should have. There was nothing flirtatious about her, nothing rehearsed, just observation. It intrigued him. They spoke for nearly an hour. Not once did the conversation become awkward. She asked thoughtful questions, listened more than she spoke, never interrupted, never tried to impress him. When the evening ended, Daniel surprised himself by saying, "I'd like to see you again." She studied him for a moment, then nodded. "I think you will." Dating Evelyn felt unusually effortless. She didn't enjoy crowded restaurants. She preferred quiet cafes, long drives, old bookstores, walks through forgotten neighborhoods. She seemed fascinated by abandoned places, not because they were frightening, but because she believed every abandoned place still remembered the people who once lived there. Daniel found the idea strangely beautiful. Ryan, his younger brother, found it strange for an entirely different reason. "She's different," Ryan said. Daniel smiled. "That's why I like her." Ryan shrugged. "I don't know. There's something about her. I can't explain it." Daniel laughed. "You watch too many crime documentaries." "Maybe," Ryan admitted, "but promise me something. If something ever feels wrong, don't ignore it." Daniel smiled. "I won't." And Ryan believed it. There were little things, nothing alarming, just odd. Evelyn never allowed photographs. Whenever someone suggested taking a picture, she stepped away or offered to take the photo herself. Daniel joked about it once. "Are you secretly in witness protection?" She looked at him with complete seriousness. "I don't like leaving pieces of myself behind." He laughed. She didn't. Another time, he asked about her family. "They're gone." "I'm sorry. It happened a long time ago." "What happened?" She looked out the passenger window. "I don't like remembering." Daniel apologized. She squeezed his hand. "It's okay." But she never answered. 5 months later, they were married. It happened quickly, much quicker than Daniel had ever imagined. Friends questioned it. Ryan questioned it even more. "You've known her less than half a year." Daniel shrugged. "I know. And that doesn't bother you?" "No." Ryan leaned forward. "Have you met anyone from her family?" "No." "Friends?" "A few." "How long have they known her?" Daniel paused. "I actually never asked." Ryan sighed. "You see? You know almost nothing about this woman." Daniel smiled. "I know enough." Ryan stared at him. "I hope you're right." The house they moved into after the wedding belonged to Evelyn. She inherited it after what she described as a complicated family situation. It sat nearly 40 miles outside town, hidden behind towering pine trees. The gravel driveway stretched almost half a mile before reaching the house itself. It wasn't old enough to be historic, but old enough to feel forgotten. Paint peeled from the wooden siding. The porch leaned ever so slightly. Wind chimes hanging beneath the roof never seemed to stop moving, even when the air was still. Daniel actually loved it. It has character. Evelyn smiled faintly. "It has memories." Moving in took most of the weekend. Boxes filled every room. Dust floated through afternoon sunlight. The place smelled faintly of cedar wood and something older. something impossible to identify. The first night, after unpacking the kitchen, Daniel wandered through the hallway looking for the breaker panel. Instead, he noticed a thick wooden door beneath the staircase. Unlike every other door in the house, this one had no handle on the outside, only a heavy iron lock. Curious, he reached toward it. Behind him, Evelyn's voice stopped him. He turned. She stood at the opposite end of the hallway, expressionless. Her voice had been quiet, yet somehow it echoed. Daniel smiled. The basement? She nodded. Yes, I was just looking. I know. She walked toward him slowly. When she reached the door, she rested her fingertips against the old wood, almost gently, then looked directly into his eyes. Never open it. Daniel chuckled. Why? Because some doors stay closed for a reason. He laughed softly. You know, that's exactly what makes people curious. She didn't smile. I'm serious. Daniel studied her. She wasn't frightened. She wasn't angry. What's down there? My family's past. He waited. She said nothing else. That night, the warning stayed with him longer than expected. Not because he intended to ignore it, but because it felt strangely out of character. Evelyn had never been controlling, never jealous, never demanding. She had never told him what he could or couldn't do, except now. Only one thing, one door. Daniel told himself it didn't matter. It was just a door. Old houses had locked rooms all the time. Unfinished basements, flooded crawl spaces, rooms families simply stopped using, and eventually stopped thinking about. There was always an explanation. He just hadn't been given one yet, so he waited. Life in the farmhouse settled into its own rhythm. Mornings were quiet, spent with coffee on the porch, the kind of silence cities never managed to manufacture. Daniel worked from home most days. Blueprints spread across the dining room table. Evelyn moved through the house like she always had. She cooked dinner every evening, left wildflowers in small jars on the windowsills, read thick paperback novels by the fireplace until her eyes grew heavy. It was a good life, better than anything Daniel had imagined for himself at 39. And yet the door was always there, at the end of the hallway, beneath the staircase with a heavy iron lock and no handle, waiting for someone to open it. A month passed, then another. Daniel never touched it, but he thought about it more than he expected. One evening after dinner, he brought it up carefully. Can you at least tell me what's down there? Evelyn looked up from her book. I told you, your family's past. That's not really an answer. She set the book down slowly. Some answers don't help people. They only hurt them. Daniel studied her face. No anger, no nervousness, just that certainty again. Are you afraid of something down there? No. Then she picked up her book. Go to sleep, Daniel. Ryan called on a Tuesday. How's the haunted farmhouse? Daniel laughed. It's not haunted. You sure? Positive. Ryan was quiet for a moment. You sound tired. I'm fine. Danny, the name Ryan only used when he was serious. Have you found anything strange out there? Daniel almost mentioned the door. Almost. Instead, he said no. You'd tell me if something felt wrong? He remembered the promise he'd made. He hung up and stared at the hallway. It was the smell that first made Daniel uncomfortable. 3 months after moving in late November, walking through the hallway at night, he stopped. Something was smelling from beneath the basement door. Not sewage and not mold. Not the expected smell of a forgotten room. Something different. It smelled like chemicals, almost imperceptible. Daniel pressed his palm flat against the wood, frowned, then told himself it was probably an old cleaning product, a can of something left behind, maybe paint thinner. Old houses had all sorts of things sitting in forgotten corners. He went back to bed, but the smell stayed in his memory. 3 weeks later, he smelled it again, this time in the kitchen, just a trace, there and gone. He looked at Evelyn. She was washing dishes. He didn't mention it, but he started paying attention. He drove home in silence. Evelyn was in the garden when he pulled up, gloves on, kneeling beside something she was planting. She looked up and smiled. He smiled back. Got everything you needed? Yes, she said. He walked inside. He sat down at his drafting table, and he realized something. He was afraid, not of the house, of her. He called Ryan that night from his car, parked at the end of the gravel driveway, far enough from the house that the porch light was just a pale smudge. I need you to look something up for me. Ryan went quiet immediately. What's going on? I need you to find everything you can on a man named Thomas Hale. He married Evelyn 12 years ago, died 14 months in. A pause. Okay, I'll call you back. Daniel sat in the dark. He watched the house. A light moved past the upstairs window, Evelyn's silhouette going about her evening. Ryan called back in 40 minutes. His name was Thomas Hale, 36 years old, married Evelyn 14 months before he died. He died of cardiac arrest. Okay, there's more. Daniel gripped the phone. Before you and Evelyn lived in your house, there was a man named Carter Webb who died there. Died 9 years before Thomas. What was the cause of death? Respiratory failure? Daniel said nothing. Danny, there's a third one. How far back? 22 years. Peter Dunn, married to Evelyn at the same address. The silence between them was dense. Ryan, how old would Evelyn have been when she married Peter Dunn? According to these records, 22. Daniel did the math slowly. That would make her 44, Ryan said, which is what the records say. But Danny, she doesn't look 44. No, Daniel said. He sat in the car for a long time. His mind moved through everything. The meals she always prepared alone, the drinks she always poured, the way she washed her own glass separately, the chemical smell beneath the basement door, a smell he now understood wasn't coming from the basement. It was coming from her. She was storing something down there. He thought about what she'd told him. My family's past. And he believed that now. He needed proof, something concrete. He couldn't walk into a police station and say, my wife seems too young for her age and her previous husbands all died. He needed to find what was in that basement. He walked back inside. Evelyn was in the kitchen. Tea on the stove. 2 cups on the counter. She turned when she heard him. There you are. I made chamomile. You seem tense. She poured the cups, pushed one toward him. Daniel looked at the cup. Then he looked at her hands. Thank you, he said. He picked up the cup, brought it to his lips, and pretended to sip. He did not swallow. He set it down. I'm going to bed. She smiled. I'll be up soon. He walked down the hallway, past the basement door, upstairs. He lay in the dark, fully dressed, waiting. An hour later, he heard her footsteps on the stairs. She paused outside the bedroom door. He closed his eyes, slowed his breathing. The door opened. She stood there for a moment. He could feel her looking at him. Then she pulled the door almost closed. Her footsteps moved back down the stairs to the hallway. He heard the basement door open. He moved silently down the stairs, through the hall. The basement door stood open 2 inches. Pale light leaked from below. He pushed the door further and stepped inside. The stairs descended into a room lit by a single bulb hanging from the center of the ceiling. Then he took 1 step down, then 2 until he saw it. Shelves along the stone wall, lined with jars, glass container, careful labels handwritten in small, neat script. Compounds he recognized from his university chemistry class decades ago. Things that didn't belong in a home. Things that in the wrong doses would destroy a heart and collapse a respiratory system, leave behind nothing a standard autopsy would flag. Not unless someone was specifically looking. At the far end of the shelf was a small journal that was open. He could see dates, measurements, notes written in the same careful handwriting. He didn't need to read every word. He understood immediately. This was a record of what she had given each of them, how much, how often, how long it took. Thomas, Carter, Peter, and a new page with his name at the top, and a timeline that had already begun. Daniel turned to go back up the stairs, and Evelyn was standing at the top. The light from the hallway framed her from behind, but he could tell it was her posture. She had heard him come down. She had always heard everything in this house. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Evelyn's voice came down the stairs, quiet, almost gentle. I hoped you wouldn't come down here. Daniel's voice was steady. How long? She didn't answer immediately. You've already had several doses. Small ones. I was taking my time. She had always been careful. Why? She was quiet. Because that's how I've always done it. That's not what I'm asking. Another silence. Because everything I have came from this house, she finally said, and this house requires maintenance. It wasn't a speech. It sounded like something she had simply come to accept long before he arrived. She moved fast. Faster than he expected. He heard the door at the top of the stairs slam. The lock engaged. He lunged up the stairs anyway. Throwing his shoulder against the door, it didn't move. Old wood, thick iron built to hold. He pounded, shouted, then stopped. The house was 40 miles from anyone. Evelyn knew that. She had chosen this house for exactly that reason. He went back down the stairs, slowly this time. The room was small. No windows with stone on all sides. He looked at the shelves, the jars and the journal. Then he reached for his phone and saw no signal. He'd never had signal inside the house. He'd always used the Wi-Fi, which she controlled. He sat down on the bottom step. He thought about Ryan, about the phone call in the car, about whether Ryan would wait for him to call back or whether something in his brother's voice tonight would push him to act. He thought about how long it would take someone to drive 40 miles down a county road to a gravel driveway hidden behind pine trees. Then he stood up and scanned the basement carefully. In the far corner, beneath the lowest shelf, a rusted iron grate set into the stone floor. A drain. He crossed the room, gripped the grate with both hands, pulled. It groaned. He pulled harder. It lifted. A narrow channel below, running water. A drainage line that fed out somewhere beneath the property. Too narrow for a person to crawl through, but not too narrow for sound. He lowered his face to the opening and shouted, knowing it was useless but doing it anyway. Because that is what people do when they are running out of options and they are not yet ready to stop. Above him, he heard Evelyn's footsteps crossing the kitchen, unhurried. Then the creak of the porch door, then silence. They found him the next morning at the bottom of the staircase. The official report would note the combination of compounds already present in his system was enough enough to weaken a heart significantly over time. The basement door was wide open when officers arrived, as though it had never been locked at all. Evelyn was on the porch, hands folded, dry-eyed. She told them she'd come home from an evening walk, found the basement door open, and found Daniel at the bottom of the stairs. She told them she'd called immediately. She was never charged. There was nothing to charge her with. The compounds in his system were consistent with a heart condition he hadn't known he had. The detective on the case told a colleague she was completely composed. No grief, no shock.